The Kweeks of Kookatumdee, written and illustrated by Bill Peet. Far off somewhere in the Tumbazaru Sea, on the jungle island of Kookatumdee, there once lived a flock of strange bird-like things called Kweeks with huge beaks and undersized wings. With no wild beasts living there to endanger the Kweeks, their only problem was eating, just filling their beaks. The Kweeks couldn't fly, so they couldn't go anywhere. Their only food was the tropical fruit growing there, the purple pumpkin-sized fruit called the plopalop that grew in one towering ploppa tree top. And since the Kweeks were entirely too clumsy to climb, getting something to eat was a matter of time. They often spent hours just waiting around for the fruit to ripen and fall to the ground. When the plopalops ripened and did finally fall, it was every bird for himself in a wild free-for-all. Kweek against Kweek, with not one playing fair, and everyone out to get more than his share. The rougher and tougher and quicker the Kweek, the more plopalops he could snatch in his beak. At nighttime the Kweeks were all huddled together in a cavern for shelter from the foggy, damp weather. As they slept, the Kweeks dreamed the same dream every night, that they had sprouted huge wings and were on a long flight to a beautiful island with plenty of space and plop-up trees growing all over the place. As they awoke from their dream, they were irked as could be when they remembered they only had one plop-up tree. A Kweek named Quentin was so worried one morning, he made a short speech, which was more of a warning. "I'm sorry if I sound awfully preachy," he said, "but if we go on being greedy, there's trouble ahead. When it comes to eating, we must try to be fair and be sure that no one gets more than his share." "Terrific! Just dandy," the Kweeks all agreed. "From now on, we'll be fair. Yes, yes, indeed." They tried to think of a plan that was just about right, so that each Kweek got a plopalop without having to fight. But some days the plopalops that dropped from the tree might be 100, or just 2 or 3. It was impossible to divide up an uncertain amount, especially since the Kweeks never learned how to count. How many for each remained a big question. Not even Quentin had a suggestion. The next morning the Kweeks were brawling once more in a battle of beaks, the same as before. And as Quentin predicted, there was trouble ahead, and the big troublemaker was a Kweek known as Jed. Every day he outfought and out-ate everyone, and in just a few months he weighed almost a ton. Jed was selfish and greedy, and not only that, the big oversized brute was as quick as a cat. When a plopalop dropped, he was ready to pounce and snap it up in his beak on the very first bounce. Unless a plopalop came bouncing their way, all the rest of the Kweeks went hungry all day. Their bellies had shrunk with so little to eat. The Kweeks weren't much more than big beaks and big feet. "We're done for," said Quentin one afternoon, "unless we do something drastic real soon." "We can sneak up on Jed before he suspects and clobber the brute with a few thousand pecks." "A dandy idea!" exclaimed the Kweeks all at once. "We'll teach Jed not to bully us poor little runts." At twilight, when fog drifted in from the sea, and Jed was napping under the tall plop-up tree, the whole flock of Kweeks, crouching low to the ground, crept up to big Jed without making a sound. "Now remember," warned Quentin, "there's no turning back. Let's demolish the brute with an all-out attack." Quentin led the attack, catching Jed by surprise, with a ferocious peck between his squinting mean eyes. But one peck was all, alas and alack. His friends were too scared to join in the attack. All at once Quentin found himself beak to beak with a fighting, mad, furious, gigantic Kweek. "You little creep," squawked Jed, "you little upstart. Just for that silly trick, I'm gonna peck you apart." Then before he could snatch the small Kweek in his beak, Quentin was gone. He took off like a streak. The chase was now on, with Jed in red-hot pursuit, and Quentin zigzagging to escape the big brute. But the island was such a very small place, there wasn't much room for a very long chase. Jed was out to get even, no matter what, and he finally chased Quentin to a very tight spot, at the edge of a bluff with nowhere to go unless he jumped into the rough sea down below. But if he jumped in the sea, he'd be a goner for sure, and a fierce peck on the head was too much to endure. There was just one thing left for poor Quentin to do. In desperation, the little Queek finally flew. Frantically flapping his wings, he sailed over the head of a flabbergasted, befuddled, dumbfounded Jed. Then out over the island, Quentin went gliding to surprise his Queek friends, who were all still in hiding. "Come on out," Quentin shouted. "Look up here in the sky. Look at me. I can fly. It's as easy as pie. Now, come on, everyone. Flap your wings and just try it. We're all light as a feather from our starvation diet." And with squeals of delight, the Queeks took off together, as easy as pie and as light as a feather. Then after saying goodbye to Kookatumdee, the Queeks flew across the Tumbuzaroo Sea. And they happened onto an island, as it turned out, which resembled the place they had all dreamed about, with dozens of tall plop-up trees growing there, and plop-a-lops for all, with plenty to spare. They didn't dare overeat, for fear they'd get fat. The happy Queeks enjoyed flying too much for that.